Luc, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Awesome. Okay, so you are a kid from the Treasure Valley, born and raised here in Idaho, but you did spend a little bit of time in Montana. We're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But what you do and your foundation is so important, and it so impacts our school communities, which is like what I focus on, which is why it's just like so awesome that you're here for this.
Yeah, it's fun being back in a community that that I've loved so much. And the I Love This Life Foundation has truly just taken me so many places. The ability to be able to speak to schools is something that I've been really passionate about. Public speaking is just something that I love, which is odd for a lot of people because most of the time that's one of the scariest things ever. But I've truly been blessed to be a part of this community and be able to take I Love This Life as far as I've been able to so far.
Okay, so you are an 18-year-old, like you are a teenager, which I think is like really important to the story. And you started a nonprofit, I Love This Life, when you were 13.
Yes.
And so what I want to do is I want to start with where you are right now.
Okay.
And then we're going to go back to the beginning and kind of talk about like where you started and where you are today.
Yeah.
So what is the I Love This Life Foundation?
Yeah. So the I Love This Life Foundation is truly the motto that I always use for it is to give every child the hope to dream big. It has a lot of projects under it. I Love This Life is kind of just the big name. Our biggest thing in the foundation is my Imagine, Believe, Achieve school assembly program. That is something that I take all across the country. I've spoken now to 40,000 students in states everywhere. And I mean, that's something to me that has always been a big passion, being able to share my message with schools, of the hardships that I've gone through in my life to show them that really no matter the situation they're in, they can always turn it into something great. And then to be able to go out and do something even better than I probably ever could is awesome to see. And that's truly the biggest piece of I Love This Life. We also have Camp Holo and Holo Brand. Holo Brand is its own thing. It's a merch company. Actually, I'm wearing one of the things that are a part of it. But Camp Holo was something that we did during the middle of 2020. Obviously, I couldn't go give school assemblies. Wasn't able to be in schools or share my message with kids. But I knew in 2020, it was probably the hardest for a lot of us. Being a teenager, I moved here in the middle of 2020. So being in online school and all that kind of stuff was rough. And we really couldn't do anything that we loved to do. Really all we could do was go outside, but we couldn't see anybody. So camp was something that was done to give kids not only a space to be themselves and to be around other people in a time where that was very rare, but also to show kids that, right, the situation may be rough, but you can make something great out of it. We had a ton of speakers come in. The camp, I always say it was built by a bunch of kids for a bunch of kids. There were adults on the thing. I always say that for adults who either listen or are at my assemblies, because sometimes that freaks them out. But all of the speakers were people around my age or very close friends of mine who have really gone through a journey to get where they are now. And truly, I Love This Life is just a feel good, honestly. I love doing what I'm doing, but I also love seeing the impact it has on kids and to then, receive messages back from these assemblies to say these kids can truly go out and make something great. It's truly just the best thing ever.
Okay. And I'm listening to you and I'm like, okay, and you're 18 years old. That's a really cool component of it. I'm a parent of 4. My oldest is 18 and he's off at college right now. And he was actually on the podcast recently. And one of the things that you focus on in your assemblies are some of your experiences, like the messages. You talk about mental health and you talk about bullying. Yeah. And that was something that, gosh, my teenager experienced. It was interesting, actually, as I was listening to your story on your website. You've got some great YouTube videos that you had kind of your first real bullying experience when you were in 5th grade.
Yes.
Will you tell me about that?
Yeah, actually that's truly like the main component of the assembly. I always have a pair of pink shoes that sit in a box that come with it because that was truly the reason I was bullied was for the color of my shoes. My dad, this originally all started out and I Love This Life with cancer fundraising. That was a huge thing for me. I lost my grandfather to cancer, so it's a huge part of my life. And I would wear a pair of pink shoes to school as I followed my dad who did that at his work for a person battling breast cancer. So he'd wear pink shoes every Friday. And I caught on to that in 5th grade and said, well, I'm helping these kids with cancer. Why don't I do the same thing? And I was called every name in the book. I was shoved around on the playground. You grow up in Montana, it's a lot of kids in cowboy boots and things like that. So I had kids who'd run up with mud on their shoes to cover up the fact that mine were pink. That was for me truly the day I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up on it all because that's truly what I thought would happen if you do something good. It would turn out like something like that. But I always tell kids, I learned a very important lesson that day, and not to make a decision the moment something happens. And I remember running back that next day, and I told my dad, I said, Dad, I want to go find the brightest pair of pink shoes I could find, because I wasn't going to let what some kids on a playground dictate these kids that I was helping. And that's truly where it all started for me. That was my biggest thing, and truly the kickoff to everything that I've done now. If it wasn't for a story like that, I probably wouldn't be in this situation. I wouldn't be doing the things I love to do, traveling across the country, speaking to kids. So that's truly the kickoff for it all.
So, and when you say like kickoff, because you said that you were already helping kids with cancer at that time, what were you doing before the pink shoes?
So originally I was racing cars. At the age of, I think it was 7 when I started. I used to race these cars called quarter midgets, and I'd travel all across the country doing those. And then it moved up into a bigger car called a Bandolero. And those cars was truly when the cancer sticker started, which was the biggest thing for me at the time. We were raising money. I was working with a company called Race to Cure. We would raise money for the families to have travel to see their kids in treatment. And that was a big thing we worked on, because we always wanted families to be together during a time like that. And truly, probably one of the hardest parts of their life to see their kid go through something like that. And I would travel all across the country, and I'd hear these stories of people who had struggled with cancer themselves, or had somebody who was struggling with it, who had won their battle, or honestly to memorialize the people who had lost their battle. And by the end of it, there's a picture in my assembly, and it's a very early picture, of the inside of my car was filled with these stickers of just honoring people, the people who had won or fighting or had lost their battles. And by the end, it was so full. We were overlapping stickers. But that was truly the start of it all, was just raising money for kids battling cancer through racing.
So I think that's when I was listening to all your stuff on your website, and I was like learning about what you're doing today and where you started, right? Like, so what you do today is helping kids with mental health, like address those issues and talk about bullying and things like that.
Yeah.
But you started with raising money for kids with cancer in something that you actually really enjoy doing, which is racing, right? And it's really evolved into this thing.
Yeah.
And it's something that you really have to work at and like just be very intentional and diligent in this process. And that for me, like as a woman in her 40s, that was such an inspiring message to me, because it's not easy to keep going. I mean, that's number one, right? But then the other thing is that you never know exactly where you're going to end up from where you start.
Yeah.
And like the whole progression of your story as a teenager, that like for me, that was like so cool. So that was kind of like there's just so many different components of your story, but as an adult, that was the one that I connected with, was that you started with something and it's evolved into something else.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's truly been a journey, I will say. Looking back at it now, and every time I look at the assembly, because it's a true run through my life up to now. And to look back at it and see where it started, I always get the question of, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back and tell them where you are right now? And I said, I would have never believed you. I never thought that something that I was doing for the love of it, for racing and for the good of raising money for kids battling cancer would turn into, being able to go countrywide and share a message of mental health and self-esteem. I truly never thought it'd be possible, but I'm truly so thankful where this has gotten me, and I'm thankful for all the people who have helped me along the way, because I truly would never be here without them.
Right. So the moment with the pink shoes, I think is really profound, just because I think a lot of fifth graders feel that way.
Yeah.
I mean, people are picked out for something that's different, and then they get made fun of for it, right? Singled out. And so what happened after, you wanted brighter pink shoes. What happened at that point after that?
I always tell the kids I knew the risk, kind of what was going to happen going back with another pair of pink shoes. And actually those are the shoes that I carry around in the box with me that I'll show the kids, is like, these are the shoes. Those are the ones that I wore going back. And I knew the consequences of what could happen. I'd seen what had happened before. I think going back the second time with them, those kids kind of realized this isn't someone we aren't going to break as easily as they thought we could. And now actually, the way this has grown, I actually did an assembly at my middle school when I was in Great Falls. So I could look out in the crowd and point out the exact kids who were the reason that I'm in the spot I am now. And you could see their faces and say, we never thought this is what this would grow into.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was always the biggest thing. You know, I now have my own shoe line that honors the pink shoes. And truly be able to go back now and look at that and realize that quitting was never the right option there. It never would have been. So I'm very thankful I didn't. And I'm very thankful for my dad who gave me the lesson of not making a decision the moment something happens, because that's truly the reason I'm here today.
Right. It was actually, my son just told me something about, and the quote's not actually coming to me, but something about how failure is only a bad thing when we quit.
Yep.
Like when we, and
Yeah.
that, like, to your point, you didn't quit. And so then when did you actually start the I Love This Life Foundation?
So that came not very long after the pink shoes. Actually, it truly, the start of I Love This Life for me was the passing of my grandfather. You know, I tell in my assembly, like, the story of my grandfather was my best friend growing up. It was every summer I was up there with him, whether it was tying flies, fly fishing, doing art, anything it was, I was always doing it with him. And that is a story that my entire family knows, is that truly he was my best friend. But when he passed, I was tasked with picking the music for his memorial service along with my cousin. And I had found a song by a band named Low Cash called Best Seat in the House. And it was hearing that song and the lyrics and how that stuck with me led to me listening to more and more of their music. And I was able to see them live in concert actually here in Boise. And I was able to go up on stage with them during a song called I Love This Life. And that was the moment I knew that it was 4 words that I never thought would change my life, but it truly has to now. And that's truly the start of the I Love This Life Foundation. It all comes from a song title and some lyrics in a song. It's truly the start of everything that it's grown to now.
That's the coolest. I love that because I'm a big music fan. So I love that you're inspired by music. That's really valuable. So how old were you when you started this then?
So the actual foundation, I was 13. That's how old I was. Racing, I was probably 6, 7 at that point. But the foundation truly started at the age of 13. You know, that was something for me. I knew I wanted to do something more with that name. It actually came to me on a drive home from that concert. We were stuck in traffic, and I knew I wanted to do something more with I Love This Life. I knew it could have a bigger impact. But that's, truly when it all started. And now it's obviously grown to this point. But looking back at it all, it really started at 7 with cancer fundraising. That's when I knew I had the heart to help people. And I Love This Life fell into place after that.
And then what did you do with the foundation once you started it?
So I Love This Life actually wasn't a nonprofit at the beginning. It was actually a t-shirt company. So we were still really working with cancer fundraising, and that truly was the reasoning behind I Love This Life. You know, Chris and Preston of Low Cash were huge into St. Jude. So we'd always, anything that we sold for them or sold with the shirts would go to St. Jude in honor of them and the name. And truly 2 of the greatest people ever, Chris and Preston. They've supported me all along the way. You know, they were that was a worry with using a song title for a t-shirt company name, the whole problem of copyright and things like that with it. They were totally on board. So that was an awesome thing also to have going on with this. But it truly started out as just a simple t-shirt company, you know, something to continue spreading even more awareness about cancer fundraising and to carry on that message at what the time was with racing as well. So. And
then when did you start the assemblies? Like, when did you start doing those?
So those came about 2017. And that was something after meeting with the previous mayor of Boise, Mayor Beater. That was the time where we made the switch from cancer fundraising to mental health and self-esteem. I had met with his team, and he wanted me to carry on still doing what I was doing with cancer fundraising, because to him that was still so important, but to more switch to the side of mental health and self-esteem and truly taking on that challenge. And that was a challenge with my pink shoe story. I was ready to take on the world with it. And that's truly when the assembly started. You know, that was the time where we had released the first journal, Create Your Great. And that was truly the point of this could be shared with kids all across the country. And it started out small in elementary schools in my hometown of Great Falls. And it only just grew from there. But it was 2017 where it truly kicked off and became what I Love This Life is today.
Okay, so you're talking about Boise and Great Falls.
Yes.
So you were born and raised here, but you did spend a little bit of time up there, but you started the foundation here. Tell me about that.
So I was originally born in Boise in 2005. My mom, dad, and I moved out in 2008, moved to Great Falls. I was never the biggest fan of that choice, but looking back at it now, the time I got to spend with my grandfather and my grandparents is truly a time I will never take away. I'm truly thankful for the time I got to spend there. And then stayed there until my freshman year in high school. I finished up that year, and that was about the time I knew my time in Montana was done. I wanted to move back to Boise, a place that I had truly always called home, a place that I have missed. I actually incorporated the foundation down here when we were living in Great Falls because I knew it was every time you incorporate a foundation, you have to have quarterly meetings every business quarter. And we had to have them down here because that's where it was incorporated. So that was kind of my ploy of, we get to spend more time in Boise. Yeah, we're going to do that here. So that was kind of a way for me to spend more time in a place that I love and have always loved. And now obviously moving back here, started my sophomore year of high school, spent the rest of the time here. So.
Spent the rest of the time here in the Treasure Valley. Yeah. It's beautiful here. So what then, when you started doing assemblies, what are you talking about in your assembly specifically?
So the assembly message is truly a message of inspiration. It's called Imagine, Believe, Achieve, because all throughout the assembly, it's about imagining in a goal and believing in it and knowing that you can achieve it. I talk about the start of my life. I come from a broken home. My mom and dad divorced when I was at a really young age. I talk about that. I talk about the pink shoes. I talk about my grandfather. I talk about all the hardships in my life in hopes to inspire kids that, right, no matter the situation you may go through, you're not alone, number one. Because that's a lot of time the biggest thing is kids think that, well, I'm the only one who's ever gone through this. But in me sharing this message, I hope they see that I'm not the only one anymore. But also to show them that no matter your situation, you can go out and do something great, so long as you believe in yourself. And that's truly the message that Imagine, Believe, Achieve carries, is that you can do just about anything so long as you believe in yourself. And that's truly the biggest thing for me and has always been the biggest thing for me.
So something that I find really interesting about like your story and what you're drawing from is that it's really relatable, right? I mean, as I mentioned, like my kids have been bullied in, middle school, and they've lost people in their lives, and, they and they have friends whose parents are divorced, right? Yeah. I mean, everything that you're talking about, people can connect with these messages. And I think that that's really profound to me, because one of the things that I take from your story is that we don't have to have something that's so dramatic happen to us to share our story, to help and inspire people around us and make changes, like help make changes within our community.
Yeah. That's always the biggest thing. When I first started doing the assemblies, I wanted kids to know that this happens all the time. It's not just you. Like some kids, a lot of kids think that way, right? It's just them who's gone through a divorce, or it's just them who's been bullied. That there are thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of kids everywhere in the world who go through the exact same stuff. And that's what I hope that the message leaves with a lot of them, is that you truly are not alone. There are people all around the world who are willing to help and who have gone through the same thing as you. I always say it's a lot easier to take battles together than it is just by yourself. And it's truly something I hope every kid at some point will understand, is that no matter where you are in life, there's always somebody. There's always somebody who's been through the same stuff as you, who's willing to help you, and who truly will be there for you. Truly, the biggest inspiration I've probably ever had in my life is my dad. He's the reason I'm so good at public speaking. I'd have to sit through his sales meetings and hear the way he talks to even grown adults, and be able to take stuff like that and turn it into obviously what is now the assemblies and camp and things like that. I mean, truly, everybody out there has gone through something. It's not an if, it's a when, because in the end, everybody will struggle. But to know that you aren't alone in that fight is truly one of my biggest things.
And so what type of messages are you hearing from teenagers as you're spreading this message across the states?
Yeah, that's truly the biggest thing for me. After an assembly, I'll probably have 40 to 50 messages of kids who are sharing their story, who are sharing the fact that I truly thought I could never struggle, or I never thought that there were other people out there who were like me, who had gone through a similar situation. And those are truly some things that I put in the assembly to show kids that you guys aren't alone in this. There are thousands of kids who have gone through probably a similar situation as you guys. But to see those messages and hear them back, to hear kids' stories and how the assembly affected them and how it's changed them for the better, is truly something I would never trade the world for. It's a lot of eye-watering moments between my dad and I, which is rare, but Um, it's truly some of the greatest things in the world to know that a message like this can have such a big impact.
Well, and what I feel like you're doing is normalizing the teenage experience. That, hey, we all go through these hard
Mhm.
things, and that's normal.
Yeah.
And it's also hard.
Yeah.
And because it's normal and hard, you don't have to be alone in that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful message in that.
Yeah, and that's always the biggest thing, when I go and speak to high schoolers, that's the biggest thing I always hear back from them is a senior in high school. It's scary to be a senior in high school, because it's the end of something that you've been a part of for 18 years of your life, and you're being thrown out into the big scary world with no schedule, no plan. But to hear them say that this message shows me that I'm prepared for it, that I can go out and do anything that I can put my mind to is truly the biggest thing for me, to know that people will start to realize that it's scary to be a kid growing up. It's scary to be a teenager. But you can do just about anything. That's truly the biggest thing. And to see that message take effect is something that I will always hold dearly to my heart.
Mm-hmm. So, what type of hard things then for you did you feel like you experienced as a high schooler?
Truly the biggest thing for me was graduation. I mean, not the experience of graduation is awesome, but the time after that, I truly think is the scariest part of your life. Kind of being thrown out into the world with really no plan, with no schedule. Kind of the weirdest thing, it's not waking up 7 o'clock every morning, getting ready to go to school at 8 and be home at 3:20, 3:40 at night. Waking up and not hearing that alarm go off every day is kind of weird, and will still be weird probably for a long time, just because it was something I was so used to. And that was the hardest thing for me coming out of high school, was the schedule. To go from class to class at a certain time period every day, except for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was the biggest thing and hardest thing for me, because it kept me in line. Coming out of the first month out of high school, I was all over the place and didn't keep track of time and crazy. But that's truly, I mean, for me was the biggest thing, was that it's crazy. It's the change is incredible. But it truly is some of the hardest stuff you'll probably have to go through in school, in your schooling career, is when it comes to a close.
Right. Because it's different.
Yeah.
It's the end of something and the beginning of something
Yeah.
else. Yeah. So you take your assembly on the road.
Mhm.
And so when you finished high school, you had assemblies to do in the
Yeah.
fall time. What does that look like when you take to the road?
Yeah. So a lot of the assemblies will actually drive to. It's me and my dad. My dad will always tell that I can't truly fully go on my own yet out of state because I can't rent a car. I have to wait till I'm 23 to do that. But it's a lot of road time between my dad and I. We'll trade off driving. Most of the time he will drive because I'm probably asleep in the passenger seat. He will say that I'm the worst co-pilot to have on a road trip because I just sleep the entire time. But truly, it's most of the time we do week-long stuff, so we'll be in Montana for a week, or we just go and do one-off school assemblies when a school calls and says, this is truly an issue that we need to discuss. We'd like you to come in and share your story. But a road trip for my dad and I is getting ready the night before, making sure we have everything ready, leaving that day and showing up, doing the assembly, and then probably not the smartest decision of driving the entire way back home that night. We come home very tired, but truly that time with him, I wouldn't trade for the world. My dad means everything to me. Him and my grandfather were my two biggest pieces of my life and still are. So that window time with him, I wouldn't trade for the world. And to be able to share all of these experiences with him as well is truly just the greatest.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing teenagers talk about how much they love like a parent, like one of their parents. That's a message that warms my heart. Okay, so talk to me. I did see that you were on the CBS morning show.
Yes.
What was that like?
Oh my goodness. That was probably, I can explain to you the entire experience leading up to it. So my dad and I are sitting at home on a Sunday morning. And he gets a call, and the caller ID when it pops up is capital C and a bunch of spaces, lowercase BS news. So my dad thinks this is some scam. There's no way this is the actual thing. So he lets it go to voicemail. I remember he walks in my room and he says, you're going to need to listen to this. And it's through the voicemail, it's somebody with CBS News saying, we've heard your story from another news program. We want you to come and share it. And that to me was just mind-boggling in its own. But to actually be there live in studio, I think will truly be the craziest experience I've ever gone through in my life. the size that they have to work with in those studios, it was because it was right in the middle of Times Square. We got to spend a day in New York before we had to film and then fly out the next day. Um, got to see some really cool stuff. Got to go to the Empire State Building. It's just, to me, I like New York. There's some parts that I'd like to go to more than others. But just the experience of being on a news program like that. Growing up, that's every morning my grandparents would have that on the TV, one of the news programs. To know that I'm now on one of these is just a wild experience. To have the probably millions of dollars in camera material around you, like, I don't want to break anything, because if I know I do, it's going to be a lot of money. But also just to know that, this news program isn't like your new local news program and watched by thousands of people. It is millions of people. And they don't tell you that before they start, which is, they're like, before I sat down in the chair and they walked to me and go, you're going to be sharing your story with about 2 to 3 million people. I'm like, what? You're expecting me to not be nervous after that? That was truly the most inspirational thing to me, and the most, I don't even know the word to put it, the most jaw-dropping moment to me. And to be around people like Nate and Gail, to truly see them, Gail actually had come back to my kind of like staging room more times, and I was told, it's the funniest story. They have a person who walks around with Gail to let her know when it's time to go. And she had walked back so many times, and the guy goes, Gail, you have 30 seconds. So you can hear her running down the hallway back to the desk. And she had spent all that time talking to me and hearing my story before I went on stage with them. And that truly the greatest moment of my life, honestly. It's led to so many great things. It's led to so many possibilities back east, back in New York and places like that. So truly for me, that was probably one of the greatest moments of my life.
I love that. And when did that happen? Like, when was that?
That was last year, August or September.
Okay, so just like several months ago.
Very, very recently. And just the whole experience of going through that, having somebody emailing you all your flight details and like, you need to be here at this time. We'll pick you up in a cab service, drive you to here. You're staying here. Is like, whoa, completely different from all the other news interviews I'd done up to that point, with local news stations where you're there either at my school or in my house, or it's like, this is entirely different. And it's such a bigger scale that is something truly just jaw-dropping and kind of shocking in a sense.
Well, and also I imagine probably really validating.
Yeah. To be able to have people of I always say of that caliber, and the amount of influence that those people have, to hear my story and want to hear it live on TV, was truly like the most validating thing for me. Like, I can do this. There have been some times through assemblies where it's like, is this really what I want to do? Do I want to continue doing this? But to be on something like that is truly, I know I can do this and I can take this as far as I want to. That was truly the biggest validation for me, was there are people out there who want to hear something like this and who are intrigued in things like this and want to have this message shared across the country. That was the biggest thing for me.
So one of the things that I loved about that clip, which you have on your website, is that, they're talking to you, they're asking you some great questions about your personal life and your experience with your parents. And then, you're talking about how much you love your dad, and then they clip over to your dad.
My dad was not the biggest fan of that, because you could see it in when they were filming when they were right before we went on live on TV. You could see my dad was going to stand off kind of in like the waiting room because he gets nervous around stuff like that. And they're like, no, why don't we have you come stand over here? So you could tell that was being set up. And my dad was like, I knew they were going to do it and I didn't want to be on TV. But I mean, truly, that was awesome for me, to see the person who had got me here, who had been through my side, through all the crazy ideas I've had, through everything that I've gone through, the person to always be there for me, be right alongside me. Because when I talk to kids and I talk to adults, when you pull back the curtain, it's two people. It's me and my dad. That's who runs this entire thing. And it's to see where this has grown with him right by my side is truly something I will always be grateful for.
I just think that's the sweetest, really. I love it. And one thing, so it was just not that long ago, I was standing in front of a bunch of legislators, kind of presenting something to them. And I was talking about Idaho kids.
Yeah.
You know, some of our Idaho kids are born and raised. Some of them have only been here a year. And some of them have generations of family members that have been here. And as I've been listening to you talking, I continue to be reminded that you're an Idaho kid. And you're an Idaho kid who's making a difference, and you have had experiences and you want to make a difference, and you are making a difference, and you're being very intentional with all of it. And then you're being recognized on national news for it. And as I was just listening to you talk about, like, you know, being in New York City and talking to Gayle King, and I'm thinking, I've never met Gayle King before, right? And I'm thinking, this is one of our Idaho kids who wants to be here and make this huge difference. Now, you said something before we started recording about how you have, well, and you said it also during, that you have had assemblies with 40,000 kids.
Yeah.
But not very many of those have been in Idaho.
No.
Tell me about that.
So, you know, when my dad and I, we always look at kind of where the most of our assemblies have taken place. And the funniest thing is when we moved back here, most of our stuff is Montana now. And when we were living on Montana, most of the stuff was out of the state. So the way that works is just funny to me. But when we look at the numbers, you know, it's 40,000 students I've spoken to over quite a few years of my life now, but it's less than 500 kids in the Treasure Valley that I've spoken to. And that's truly something that I've always wanted to change, you know, seeing what has gone on with students here in the Treasure Valley, you know, kids truly taking their own life over mental health, self-esteem, things like that is something that I hope to help with in this community, you know, help change those rates and show kids that there is a better path than what a lot of them have taken. But it's something that I truly can't explain. You know, I can't explain why we aren't in more schools in the Treasure Valley. It's just choice, whether it might be from principals or things like that. When the time comes and people want me to be here, I will be ready and raring to go. But until then, I mean, it's still stuff all across the country, you know, traveling out of Idaho to go speak to kids. And I mean, I truly hope that sooner than later, we have a lot more home-based assemblies. So it's not the long drives and the late nights getting back, which I love even still to this day. But I would love to have more assemblies in the place that I can call home and to make a difference in this community.
So that just like really speaks to me, because this podcast is all about growing our school communities, particularly here in Idaho. Yeah. And when you were on that CBS morning news, behind you, there was a sign that said "School Matters."
Yep.
I mean, that was kind of like the segment they were doing all week long, right? And from my perspective, I kind of broaden that a little bit more. And I say our school communities matter. And our school communities are people who they're not just our like teachers and our administrators and parents and students. Those are a really important part of our school communities, but they're also people who are contributing, right? There are business owners, they're the businesses that are around, they're the nonprofits, right? They're the organizations, and they're the taxpayers, right? They're the citizens who are around, who they're our neighbors. It's everything that contributes to our school community. And I think that's one of the reasons why your message resonates so much with me and why I wanted to have you on the podcast, was because you're intentionally working to help school communities. Yeah. And that's beautiful. And I feel like if we're not intentional about doing it, then no one's going to do it.
Right. You know, it's one of the biggest things that I have seen. You know, growing up in Great Falls, we had programs that was like Bully Free Starts With Me and things like that. But it's when it's stuff that's pushed on us like that, we will never do it. You know, I remember growing up in elementary school, I never cared about the program because it was something that was so pushed on us. We're like, this isn't going to work. You know, it's something that we won't ever listen to. We won't ever, you know, they had us do the chants and the rallies, and it just never worked. You know, when it's something so pressured on you to take part in and be a part of, that's truly when you see stuff like that fail. When you see programs like that fail, when it's something that, you know, is given to you as a tool, then that's where you start to see it succeed. You know, we were at a while, I say a while ago, it was years ago now, but we were in Cleveland for a week, you know, speaking to some schools in the Catholic diocese, and they had programs that they gave to kids as tools, you know, to whether it be if they were struggling with bullying, struggling with mental health, they gave those kids those tools, and you could see it working. That was something to me that was so impressive to me is that there are programs out there that actually work. It's just the way that schools apply them is where you truly start to see the difference between success and failure. And it's truly when we give kids tools, that's when you start to see the success.
I like that because, and part of I was like, listen, I was thinking of the word cringe, that sometimes these programs, those like catchy phrases for kids, they feel cringy.
They do.
And then they don't want to incorporate them into their lives. And then then they're uncomfortable with the cringy idea. And they're not going to talk about it with their friends. Right. And so I mean, as you've been talking, one of the things I've been thinking about are my own kids and some of the things that they've gone through. And it's so often the support that they feel is organically through their friends, knowing that they're not alone.
Right.
And they're not the only ones dealing with these things, and their friends are there to help support them through the process.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that you're like, oh, like the tools are what matter.
You know, the best, I think, kind of example I have of that is a school that we spoke to in Fort Benton, Montana. One of the girls who was there set up this, it was something that ran through the counselor in the school. But she set up this almost kind of, it was like a Google form sheet, but it was something that if you were struggling with bullying, mental health, it was an anonymous, almost hotline style type thing where the response would be sent to the counselor, right? They could anonymously talk to you about what was going on and help you try and fix it. That truly is one of the best examples that I could ever give because it's something that worked. You know, a lot of kids in schools, if they're dealing with something like that, they don't want to go to the counselor because then it's like, ooh, he's going to the counselor for something. I wonder what it is. And that was always like the scariest thing in school for me. It's like, I never wanted to go to the counselor. It's like the scariest thing ever. Because you didn't know what kids were going to think of you if you went to the counselor. But to have a program like that and see that it works and see that kids are truly using it I hope would show people, a lot of people everywhere, that it doesn't take much to help kids, right? It doesn't take this big program that a lot of kids probably won't use. It can be something as simple as that. And that's the thing that I hope that my message shares, is that it's the tools that give kids the power to go and make a difference, not the big programs that, you know, kind of force things on us.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, just a couple things before we end. Yeah. One, tell me about these journals that you have.
Yeah. So Create Your Great was something that I originally started because of a girl here in Boise. I won't go too deep into her story just for her sake. But she was someone who was really struggling, and I wanted to have something set in place in the I Love This Life Foundation that showed kids the positives in their day. You know, because a lot of the schools that I go and speak to, a lot of the reasons kids struggle is that it's so easy to look at every negative in our day. And looking in the positive is a whole lot more difficult. That's what the journal does. So that was the original Create Your Great journal. We actually released it here in Boise with an event called Project Hope. We had filled Jump in downtown, their big concrete circle that's called Celebration Circle. We had filled that with positive chalk art to show people who were walking over that day that looking at a positive in my life, or looking at a positive in my day, could change my life. And then we've actually just released a second journal now called Create Your Great Together. It's still Create Your Great, just the revamped version. But now it's something you can do with someone. You know, that was the biggest thing we got with the original journal, was that it was somebody by themselves. You know, they wouldn't feel the need to take part in it. But to be able to have somebody to work on that together, whether it be a parent, a friend, somebody like that, to be able to share kind of those positives with is something that has truly been a big part of my message and what the journal is truly about.
I agree. I like that you added that together, because that's your message, is that together we can do like these good things, right? And that you're not alone. In one of your YouTube videos, you say, like, open your mind, open your arms and your heart to new things. I loved that. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, actually, that video was the original merch video we had for I Love This Life when it was a t-shirt company. And that was a quote that I can't remember where I've heard it from now. But to me, you know, what truly means is that when you open your mind to new things, and you open your arms to embrace them, and your heart will truly start to fall in love with it. That's what I Love This Life was for me. That's what that truly means to me, is that when you open your mind and your arms to these new possibilities, these new ideas of where you could go in your life and what you could do with it, your heart just runs with it. It's truly the biggest thing. And if your heart runs with it, you know, it's something that you should truly take a hold of and never let go.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So I always end my podcast episodes with 2 key takeaways. And when I have guests, I invite my guests to have a takeaway, and then I have a takeaway. And I usually go first because the guests are like, yeah, you go first because I don't know what you're talking about here. So my takeaway, just kind of from the conversation, essentially, my takeaway is that I think there's probably two. There's one for me, like there's like an adult Alexis version, which is it's so important to start something that you believe in because you never know what it's going to evolve into.
Yeah.
And if it's something that's good that you really feel that can make a difference, then it's worth investing in.
Right.
That's like my first one. And I don't usually have two, but I do have a second one actually, which is it's profound to me that you're not in more schools in the Treasure Valley or in Idaho, especially since just last fall, the Boise School District dealt with several teen suicides that were totally tragic.
Yeah.
And I think, I know that there are other groups in the Treasure Valley doing things too, but I do think that it's possible to do more, right? To help our kids more because they are worth investing in. Yeah. And it's worth having these conversations, even though they might make us feel uncomfortable when, sometimes talking about, as you've addressed before, talking about mental health or talking about bullying or teen suicide, or sometimes topics that maybe make us feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the fact is we need to talk about them because they're our reality. And so one of the things that I just hope is that you can be in more schools in Idaho. And I really believe that you will be. That will be part of your future is being in more schools in Idaho. And I think that I might be able to help you with that a little bit. So I'm excited to kind of talk to you about that afterwards. But anyways, those are my takeaways. What's a takeaway you've had from this conversation, Luke?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is truly seeing, from what you have said, that truly believing in a message and running with it, I think is the biggest thing that a kid could ever have in their life. Don't let a dream fade away. I think that's something that I've always listened to is always make your dreams realities because it can truly make a difference. My dreams have become realities. The I Love This Life where it is now has truly been a dream of mine, to be able to be on something like this, to be able to share this message with people all across the Treasure Valley and maybe all across the country. It's just the biggest thing for me. But always to take away is make your dreams realities. Work on that. Work on the ability to, one, believe in yourself, but two, believe in a goal that you have and know that you can achieve it.
Thank you. Luke, I really believe that your future is so bright.
Thank you.
And it's bright right now, and it's just going to continue to be bright. So thank you for what you're doing because it's so important. It's really helping our school communities, and I really applaud what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, this is awesome.
You're welcome.